Welcome to the Pursuit of Learning podcast. I'm your host, Clint Murphy. My goal is for each of us to grow personally, professionally, and financially, one conversation at a time. To do that, we will have conversations with subject matter experts across a variety of modalities. My job as your host will be to dig out those golden nuggets of wisdom that will facilitate our growth. Join me on this pursuit. If there's one thing I talk about endlessly, it is taking action. Starting. The first step. It should be the easiest step, and it's often the hardest. We often get in our own way. We procrastinate. And that is what my guest today, Eric Twiggs, writes, coaches, and talks about. There was a lot of alignment in this conversation, and it should help you move forward in your life. I hope you enjoy. Eric, welcome to the Pursuit of Learning podcast. I'd like to start the conversation with you with a question that I ask a lot of my guests, which is, what's motivating you in life right now? And what are 2 or 3 things you want to make sure we get across to the listeners in our conversation today?
Great. Clint, thank you for having me on the show. It's truly an honor. What motivates me is the opportunity to get better, right? I've been watching the Olympics, and I hear the commentators when they talk to these coaches, and they say that the elite level athlete, like look at like a Michael Phelps or a top swimmer, their goal when they train is to shave 1/100th of a second off of their time. And so that I'm just trying to get, for me, I'm just trying to get at least 1% better. And that's the thing that motivates me, because I know that 1% adds up over time. And the main thing I want to get across to your audience today is just how precious time is, and that we have to be constantly moving forward and moving in the direction of our goals. We can't stop. We can't say, I'm going to wait until things get back to normal. We just need to be moving constantly in that direction.
I am very excited to have a conversation with you on all of these topics, because I'm very aligned with you in how you approach it, what you wrote in your book, which we're going to discuss in depth, and recognize the discipline of always moving forward and taking action in life. So we're going to help our listeners with some tips and tricks on how to do that. When you wrote The Discipline of Now, Eric, what was your motivation, and who was your target demographic for the book?
So my motivation, I wanted to put a useful tool in people's hands. Because one of the things that frustrated me when I was looking at other books on the topic, it was a lot of the same type of information. It was like, oh, you got to wake up early, you got to be an early bird, don't check your email before a certain time. It was a lot of that same cookie cutter type thing. And I wanted my book to be a resource for you, even if you're someone that doesn't wake up early. If it doesn't matter what your personality type is, you can find something in the book to help you to move forward. So that's really what motivated me to get started on this journey. And the target audience is the entrepreneur and the career professional who is looking to go from good to great.
So when I think of people who are listening to the podcast, we've got people in that 25 to 45 age bracket. They're looking at, how do I get better in my life, personally, professionally, and financially? And part of what you're saying is, if you're able to adopt some of what I'm sharing with you in my book, it's going to help you get from here to there. It's going to take you that next step in your development if you're not doing some of these things already.
Oh, sure. I think so. And, if you're in a corporate environment, even if you start applying the things in the book, you'll stand out, because a lot of people they don't have that level of self-awareness. So you're just conscious of your time, and you're getting things done ahead of schedule, and you're organizing yourself accordingly. You'll stand out, and you'll find that opportunities start coming your way.
And it's, Eric, you probably have heard this one before, but generally a lot of people say when you want to get something done, give it to the busiest person in the office because that's the person who gets things done. So if you're doing that, you're going to stand out and be able to move forward in your career, which is part of what I think a lot of our listeners may want to do, is move forward in their career. So that gives us an opportunity to dive right in. Early on in the book, you talk about the importance or the difference between intention and execution. Can you share with our listeners some of the keys you have between the two there?
Yeah, I think you have to close that gap. We all have things we intend to do. I intend to clean the garage. I intend to do a lot of things. That doesn't mean that it's going to actually get done. And the top performers that I've been around, they close the gap between intention and action. Here's how it plays out. So the high level performers that I'm around, like if we go to a conference and they get a good idea, let's say it's Saturday, at the Saturday of the conference, it's the closing speaker, they get this great idea. On that Monday, they've implemented that idea. They've done something to move that forward. Whereas others that they go to the same conference, heard the same speaker, you talk to them weeks later and they haven't taken any action, but they'll say, oh yeah, that was great, man, he was awesome, but they didn't take any action. So that's really the key is really having that short, it should really be a small window between the intention and taking action.
So a lot of what we're going to talk about throughout today's conversation is figuring out how to shorten the gap between the intentions that we have and executing on those intentions.
Yes, absolutely.
That is powerful. So when it comes to the costs of procrastination, for those who are listening, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about procrastination because that's what the discipline of now is intending to help us stop or mitigate. When it comes to the cost, one of the first things you mention is quality. Can you take us through what you mean by that? And you have a 4-quadrant system that you use to describe this, Eric. Can you take the listeners through that?
Yeah, so basically your work quality suffers if you wait until the last minute. But here's what happened. This really gets me, right? When people they say, "Oh, Eric, yeah, I work better under pressure." Yeah, because they waited till the last minute. Maybe they did a presentation and people told them, "Oh, wow, you did a great job." So now they're under the impression that I work better under pressure. I call that justification for procrastination. And the problem is if you're doing something creative, a lot of times it takes a while for your ideas to incubate. So like I can start something months early. And that doesn't mean I have it finished. So like, let's say I know that something is due 6 months from now. I can start on it literally right away. It can be a small step. But once I start, it gets the mind going. And I start coming up with other ideas. And I have a habit of, for example, I have something called Evernote, the app on the phone. And I'll start a file for what I'm working on. And without fail, the ideas start coming to me. And it ends up being a whole lot better than it would have been if I just waited until the last minute just to get done. So you sacrifice quality. Everybody's had the experience being in high school or being in college. You wait until the last minute to study for a test. And it seems like it went, you got a B maybe, or maybe you got an A. And I talk about this in the book, that doesn't promote the long-term memory. Right. So you're not really learning the information when you cram and there's scientific studies that show that, you're not really learning the information. You're satisfying the short-term memory, but long-term, you're not really learning. And the whole goal, going to an educational institution is to learn an information so that ultimately your quality suffers. Now you mentioned the quadrants. And so it's got 4 quadrants, right? So quadrant, and picture this. For those of you that are listening, you have to picture this. So you got the top left corner is when the deadline urgency is high and your creativity is low. So that's, you don't want to be there. That you're waiting to the last minute to get something done. So then you've got the deadline urgency low and your creativity is high. That's more of an ideal quadrant. right? That's the second from the bottom, where you don't have the deadline in front of you. So you don't have, it's not right away. You found out about, but you've got these ideas like I just talked about, where you've started down the journey, and all of a sudden now all these ideas start coming to you, or you start having a conversation with somebody and they spark something, and it's exactly the same thing that you're working on. So that's really the key thing, is that when you start earlier, it's like the whole thing. When you stay ready, you don't have to get ready.
I love that concept, and I'll share an example with you because it's not my style. I tend to be one of those people who, let's say, says that they're better under pressure. And I'm writing a fantasy novel series with my sister, and she's visiting while I'm on vacation each year. She comes out, spends half a week or a week with me, and we go really in depth into the books. And what she wanted to do was story arc the entire next book. And me being, that type of person who says, oh, like, let's just write a chapter at a time, and I'll just text you what I think the chapter should be. It's probably not going to be the best story. And we just spent the last 3 or 4 hours, and I'm unbelievably blown away by all the ideas and the characters we created. And I know that the story that we write together now will be a much better project because we did the work early. We didn't wait to each chapter and try to come up with a new character for that next chapter. We did the work to create it and tell the story in advance of actually writing the book. And so our urgency was low. There's no deadline, which allowed our creativity to be high because we're starting early. Is that a fair quadrant to put us in on that one, Eric?
Exactly. So you can, and the other thing is you can be more experimental. Like for example, another thing, if I've got a big presentation and it's months down the road, and so a lot of times people don't know this, that like I'm testing stories on like just a common conversation, right? And I'll say, hey, it reminds me of, and it's something that's in my presentation. And a lot of times I'll gauge how they react. And if they're like, oh my goodness, wow, yeah. Or if it's something humorous and they don't laugh, or if several people don't laugh, then I'm right. But so here's the thing though, let's say I wait till the last minute and I think, oh, this is really funny. And I just go with it. It's not going to go well.
Yeah. Okay. So almost like a stand-up comic, you might not be going, a lot of them before they go on the big stage, they go on to the local comedy circuit and test it in front of 10 to 20 people. You're doing that in everyday conversation. You're testing your lines, testing your presentation material. And if it doesn't work, you're rewriting it so that when you get up in front of a lot of people, you've got a well-crafted presentation.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the way to go. That's the example of how starting early can help you with that. Here's the other thing too. We talk about quality. You are more likely to become a victim of circumstances when you wait till the last minute, right? So let's say you wait till the last minute and something goes, like I talk about in the book, how I was in college and I waited till the last minute to write this paper for one of my classes, and computer went out, and I had all these problems, and I thought I had a good relationship with my professor, but he docked my grade big time because I turned it in late. And this could have been, if I had started earlier, I could have recovered from something going wrong. So again, it goes back to how waiting till the last minute can impact the quality of your work.
Yeah, there's a lot on the go right now, and you've got an excellent point. Like if the dog gets sick or your kid gets sick, well, you just chew up a day, and you had waited to such a last minute that you're like, okay, well, I have to do this on this day, this on this day, this on this day, and then I'll be able to make it through this really tight stretch. But if you wait too long and something goes wrong, there's no recovery time. So you need to build that recovery time in. That's a beautiful way to think about it. One of the things I hadn't really thought about and you highlight is there are also some health consequences to procrastination. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh, just even on the basic level of putting off appointments. And, I've talked to people all the time who went in for something routine and found out it was a major problem, and they were lucky to be there. There was somebody who was at my church who was going in for a routine physical, and he found out he was having a heart attack while he was there. And it was like literally, had he not gone in, he may not be with us. And so literally, I mean, just putting off, and it's easy, especially if you're a high achiever, right? It's easy to put off the appointment. You got an appointment scheduled, and you're like, oh, I got this meeting, and there's a lot of things I could be doing. I got to work on this. Yeah, that can have consequences. And so just that procrastination piece can have health implications.
And this tends to be something that men are notoriously bad for, right? You have something physically that's presenting itself and you just say, I'm fine. I'll get it checked out when I have time. Or if it gets worse, I'll go to the doctor. And often when it gets worse, that's when it's too late. We need to detect these things as early as we possibly can in order to address them. What are some other costs that people don't think about to procrastination?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's financial cost. I mean, there are companies that literally their profit model is based off of you putting things off. I mean, you like the credit card companies, with the late fees, and these companies would be out of business if everybody just paid on time. If everybody paid on time, everybody just stayed current. These companies would struggle. But a lot of the money they make off of late fees. Even if I remember, I was a district manager in a retail environment, and we used to do mail-in rebates. So we'd say, you know what, you can get this product and you have a $50 mail-in rebate. The reason we did mail-in rebates, I hate to admit this, because we knew most people wouldn't mail in the rebate. People, they would just never get around to doing it. So, I mean, there's a financial cost. Not only that, but you could damage your reputation. And in most settings, there's always that person who's always late, right? That's their brand. If you say the meeting starts at 9, they're going to come in at 9:15 looking disheveled. And that's just them. They're the late guy. And you may not think and maybe nobody says anything to them. Maybe everybody just gets used to them being late all the time. But I've been a part of a lot of, at the corporate level, I was a part of a lot of like hiring decisions and who should we promote. And we never said, hey, you know what? What about that guy in accounting who's always late? It just never works that way. It's always like, well, no. Like that, I've seen where that person's name comes up and it's like, well, no, he's often, he's late a lot. And that person has hurt himself not knowing it. So you can,
yeah, they don't even know that they're getting passed over for that next opportunity.
Absolutely. Their name is coming up and they're getting passed over. And the other thing is just within relationships, because like people have different, perceptions of time. Like some people, if you say 9 o'clock, they're thinking, okay, it means 9-ish. But then there's some people that you say 9 o'clock, really, I'm thinking 8:55. And so if you come in if I'm thinking 8:55 and you're coming in 9:10, 9:15, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, this person doesn't respect my time. He's just constantly coming in late. And I may never articulate that to you. For me personally, I would, but I'm just saying the person may never articulate that. But now there's a breakdown in trust. You're damaging the relationship. So there's just all kinds of costs. So here's the challenge. Here's why I like to talk about the cost, because a lot of times there isn't, if you procrastinate, there isn't an immediate negative consequence, right? It's not like, you put off writing your blog and all of a sudden the procrastination police knock your door down and come in and arrest you. It doesn't work that way, right? So you think you're getting away with it. And you don't really understand that it's actually costing you. But it goes back to that 100th of a second.
Yeah. You may even have...
That's a little thing. But over the time, there's a reason that Michael Phelps' hand touches the wall before somebody else's hand does, right? It costs you. You think it's close, but it goes back to not doing those little things and taking action when you're supposed to.
And so we're going to focus now. Most of our conversation is how we overcome that and what some of the roadblocks are and how we overcome those. One of the first things that you talk about is the law of large numbers and how that can be a path to success. What is that, Eric?
Typically, if you're in a selling environment or you're trying to even if you're trying to recruit people, yeah, if you play the numbers game, eventually you're going to come out on top. But you have to put in the work, right? You have to be putting things out there. There's a saying like, you don't get what you wish for, you get what you pitch for, right? So you have to. That's where action comes in. You like the people I know that get big deals, or get the big contract. That's usually not the only contract that they bid on, right? They bid on all kinds of other contracts that may not have worked out. And that's why it's a numbers game. And like a lot of times in a selling environment, certain products, you could say the wrong thing. And eventually, just with the numbers, somebody's going to say yes. Like if you're selling life insurance, or you can say, you don't want life insurance, do you? If you say that to enough people, odds are somebody's going to say, well, yes, I do.
Sold.
That's where the large numbers come in. So, and the suggestion I make to people is that if you're not seeing the results, if you're in a selling environment or persuasion environment, you have to look at the amount of effort you're putting out. What do the numbers look like? How many calls are you making? How many proposals are you generating? How many of those meetings are you having with decision makers?
And if you're procrastinating, you're not going to hit the numbers.
Exactly.
The only way you can hit the numbers is to start early enough. If you've got to make 100 calls a day for a month, if you wait 16 days, you're not going to make 400 calls a day for a week and a half. You're too late.
Exactly. And then so the key, we talk about large numbers, the key is to know your number, right? So if your number is 100, to get these 10 sales, I've got to make 100 calls. Let's say if that's your number. So the focus is making the 100 calls. Don't focus on the outcome, focus on the process. Yes or no, did I make my 100 calls? And if I didn't make my 100 calls, I can't complain about not getting the result.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say for the listener, what Eric's talking about here is conversion rate. So what you want to know is how many calls do I need to make for each sale? So how many calls to convert one sale, which is a very, very powerful metric to know when you're trying to sell something, close deals, is how many deals do I have to look at or touch to convert one?
Absolutely. So yeah, and one of the things that math doesn't lie, right? Math isn't emotional, so if you focus on the math, and that really helps people to get moving when they just look at the hard numbers. And then the thing is, you can actually improve your conversion. So maybe it doesn't take you 100. Maybe you can get there with 90. Yeah. So I think if you focus on the process, focus on the numbers, that's a good way to avoid procrastination.
So we're talking about procrastination. We're talking about sales, and you wrote the book on this conversation. And I think part of this comes back. We're going to go backwards in time a little. You were sitting in your BMW and you looked in the mirror, and something happened inside you that made you realize sales wasn't where you wanted to be and you needed to make a change. Can you take our listeners through what happened there that brought you to here?
Right. So I thought coming out of college, and that's a whole other story, how I even got before that. But coming out of college, my thinking is that, I need to have a big income, and, I need to climb the corporate ladder. And I got to this point in my career where it looked like I'd accomplished those things. I was a district manager at 17 locations, 500 employees. We're winning these awards for best profit performance, best sales performance. And I had my BMW. It looked like I'd really accomplished those things. I had the income. And that instance you're talking about, I'm driving to my BMW. I'm sitting at the light. I look in the mirror, and the rearview mirror, and the eyes looking back at me, my eyes, were the eyes of someone who hated what he was doing. So that sent me the message that sometimes impact is more important than income.
Impact is more important than income. Take us through that.
Yeah. So the issue was that, yes, I was making the income, but I didn't feel like I was having an impact, right? It was just about getting sales and, just the grind that's involved with leading a team of 500 people. I didn't really feel like I just felt like there was something else that I was supposed to be doing. And so I went through this whole kind of period of discovery, and I had to ask myself, what is it that I'm really passionate about? And it always came back to when I was speaking in front of a group, right? And so during my career journey, there was a time where I was a corporate trainer. And I remember I used to, I could just do this all day, every day. I can't believe people get paid to do this. And this is all they do. And so, yeah, so I started to realize that, and I saw the pattern. And then when I would speak at other events in the community and I would do other things, that's really what kind of lit my fire. That's when I felt like I was having an impact. So the next thing for me was to really start to make steps in that right direction.
And our listeners may wonder, well, why partway through the conversation are they segueing into passion? And part of that is a belief that when we find our passion, when we have our vision, we're much less likely to procrastinate on it. Is that part of where we're going with this, Eric?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think if it's something that you really if it's something you're genuinely interested in, the chances of you procrastinating are a lot less because it's something that you look forward to. Jay Frederick has this book called The Big Leap. He talks about your zone of genius, right? And I believe, like I have a business partner and she's always talking about your zone of genius. And I'll bring something up. Eric, I'm sorry, that's just not my zone of genius. But she got me thinking about that. But it's in that book, and he talks about your zone of genius is that area that you are just uniquely qualified, the role you're uniquely qualified to fill. Right? It looks labor intensive to people that are on the outside looking in, but you could just do it all day. You would do it for free. It just lights your fire. You're passionate about it, and you have a high aptitude for it. So it lines up with like your natural abilities. And so that's why I think when you're in that zone of genius, if you're doing something like, if you feel like podcasting, for example, like I think podcasting is one of those things for me, right? I look forward to every episode. I don't procrastinate. I'm doing all, and even though, as you know, there's a lot of work involved with keeping a podcast going and coordinating with the guests. But yeah, I love it. And so yeah, definitely that's why passion is important, because otherwise you're going to be more likely to procrastinate if you're really not into it.
Yeah, I can second that, Eric. Every time I have a conversation with one of the guests, like I leave with way more energy than when I came into that conversation, right? So I almost think of it like introversion, extroversion. What gives you energy? If you do something for hours and somehow you're finished it and you come out with more energy than you have going in, there's something about that was attractive to you that you really have to seek to understand. What was it about what I was just doing that gives me that energy? And part of what I want to explore with you there is that we've just given one idea, right? That's one idea that you can find your passion. How else can our listeners find what their passion are? You found some of yours. I found some of mine. How do our listeners find theirs?
Well, just go back, look through your life and connect the dots. Just think about those things that you enjoy doing. That if money was if you had a rich uncle just drop $100 million in your bank account and you could just do whatever you wanted to do, what would you do? So again, for me, I would still be hosting my podcast. I'd still be going out speaking to people. I'd still be writing books. So, I think that's a clear indication if you want to find your passion. The other thing is think about things that you've overcome and that, think about pay close attention to those things that people come to you for and ask you questions about. That could be another indication as well. But there's a big challenge that you've overcome, and then you always find yourself giving advice to people about that thing, and you feel like you can just talk about it just all the time. That's another hint.
It's great. This tends to be because a lot of the books that I read and guests that I talk to, we talk about different forms of self-improvement or self-help, if you will, Eric. So this tends to be a common question. How do I find my passion? So there were a couple there that I hadn't had in my lexicon of passion finding. What do people come to you for? That can be very powerful because obviously it's something you've spent a lot of time on, and you're not going to spend a lot of time on things that you're not passionate for. What have you overcome? How can I use what I've overcome to find a passion?
Well, so I know of people, for example, that went through a bad divorce. And so I know of someone I used to coach, and she works with women dealing with divorce and helping them to take that next step. And she's somebody that's always kind of talking about the things that she learned from that experience. And I mean, that's an example. I know of someone else who was abused as a child. And so now that's their passion to, let people know you could have these devastating things happen to you and you can still be productive. I mean, she's written a book. She's got a podcast. She's got a whole lot of things where she's really turned that into a positive. I just think, I just believe that everything happens for you and not just to you. Even like terrible experiences, you have to ask yourself, what's the lesson? What am I supposed to learn from this?
What do I take from it? How can I make the world a better place for having gone through what I've gone through? I gave my niece, she is visiting with my sister, as I mentioned, and I lent she asked for some books to read. And so I pulled Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning off the shelf and said, well, if, this has to be one of the most insightful books you'll ever read. When I came downstairs this morning, my sister had it open and was, 3/4 of the way through it, was very touched by reading it. People who have gone through, for people who don't know, Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning writes about his time in a concentration camp in World War II. So a very trying and challenging time, and he used that as a means to then write books and help people and provide this message that moved a lot of people in the world forward. So there's always an opportunity to overcome even the darkest of times. It's a great example, Eric. So we find our passion, and then you take 2 or 3 concepts that I'm used to seeing in corporate jargon, but you use them for people. And what I'll say and let you dive into it and unpack it for people, we're talking your vision statement, mission statement, and core values. So how does an individual use those for their personal journey in the way that a corporation would?
Well, yeah, I think clarity, I mentioned something about clarity is the starting point of success, right? And a lot of times you procrastinate because you're really not clear on where it is that you're trying to go. And so I think the vision statement helps you to really clarify where you're trying to go. So you can think, and I think in the book I mentioned kind of the idea of like the 90th birthday and, people are gathering in your honor. And, so the question you have to ask is like, who's there? What are they saying about you? What are they saying you accomplished? So I think it helps to really have that vision for what it is to accomplish. And so I help people, to write a vision statement. And we talk about that in the book as well. So you really start to get clear, or even if it's like 5 years down the road, what's the vision? Where is it that I'm trying to go? Right. And then the mission is a little more tactical, right? So the mission is specifically how you're going about the day to day to ultimately accomplish the vision. So, like you said, same thing with a company. A great company, they've got a very clear vision. They've got a mission statement, and they're aligned on the next thing, which is your core values, which are kind of like those beliefs, those specific set of beliefs that are like your anchor, right? And that's really, so it helps you when you're making decisions that line up with the things that you value, you'll find that you're procrastinating a whole lot less.
And one of the keys you mentioned right there is that when you have your core values, you're able to use them to make decisions. And something that can cause us all to stop or slow down or procrastinate is decision fatigue. So the core values can help overcome that. Can you let our listeners know what is decision fatigue? How does it hit us? How does it cause us to slow down and procrastinate? And aside from using these core values to overcome it, how do you also use automation to overcome it, which is something you talk about, Eric?
So decision fatigue, the whole concept, and one of the people that I did research on is a Stanford University professor, Kelly McGonigal. She talks about decision fatigue. There's a lot of other studies on it, that the more decisions that you make, it's almost like a decision making thing is like almost like a muscle. So the more you're making these decisions, the more the quality can go down. You can get fatigued. So that's why if you notice, a lot of indiscretions happen like on a Friday night. And some of that is, and studies show this, that a lot of them happen on Friday, because some of this is because you've been making all these decisions throughout the week. So it's like your willpower, your willpower is down. And so you're more likely, fall off your diet or, put something off. You just don't have the willpower. So to overcome that, one of the things you need to overcome that is just understand the idea of automation. And basically it's, just because something has to be done, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to do it, right? It's all about setting up systems so certain things happen without you having to touch it. So you don't necessarily have to make every decision. So for example, it could be as simple as hiring a virtual assistant. And so he or she can be handling some of those little details. So now that's just one less decision point that you have to make. It could be setting up your email so certain emails automatically go to certain folders. Like I have on one of my email accounts, I have it set up that if you CC me on something, it automatically goes to a specific folder. So it's not in my inbox. And that's just one less thing that's one less decision I have to make, right? So you're fresher. And so that's why understanding automation is important, because you can run into that whole thing of the decision fatigue. And that's the other thing. That's why a lot of high achievers, they have certain little quirks to avoid the decision fatigue thing. Like they'll literally have all the same color suits. Like that I think that was something that former President Obama used to do.
Yeah, Obama did it. Steve Jobs always wore his black turtleneck. I think Mark Zuckerberg had his gray hoodie. So they attempt to mitigate the number of decisions that they have to make in a day. And for those who may not have read the book, there's Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, has the example, I believe it's in this book, where when it comes to parole cases and vetting them for approval or denial, as you approach lunch hour and the end of the day, the approval ratings go down. And part of that ties to, in the research, I believe, your willpower and your decision making actually is tied to energy systems. And part of people don't realize that. And I think there's something to do with, if I recall correctly, Eric, it's something to do with sucrose as an example. So if you were to have a Gatorade or a chocolate bar at 11 o'clock, and I shouldn't even be laughing at this, like if you were to have that chocolate bar at 10 or 11 o'clock, parole ratings would go up for that next hour. It's crazy to think that our decision making can so negatively be impacted simply by what we've eaten in the last 2 hours or haven't eaten in some of these examples. But that obviously would have a negative impact on our ability to, as we're looking at in this conversation, help people move forward in their lives. And when I was reading your book, there were a couple of key statements that I really enjoyed that I want to read back to you and let you dive into. One of them was, success happens on the other side of your fears. The other one, Eric, was, if you fail to act, those collages are just pictures of things you won't have. I thought that one was beautiful for people who think we just have to stick a vision board on the wall and it'll happen. Sure, a vision board helps, but it only helps if you take action. So, Eric, do you want to unpack those for us?
Sure. So let's start with the collage that you just mentioned. So yeah, vision boards is becoming like the popular thing, right? And but you watch some of these things like The Secret and all of that, and it leads you to believe that all you have to do is just think about your goal or think about the red Ferrari, and then you go out, there'll be a Ferrari in your driveway. It doesn't necessarily work that way. That you literally have to put in work, and you really have to be very intentional. Now, I mean, a vision board used correctly can be a powerful tool, because it's, the whole idea of your reticular activating system. So, it's like if you go to you go hunting you're shopping for a red Honda, and now all of a sudden, everywhere you go, you're driving along, you see that red Honda everywhere. You're like, man, everybody went out and got a red Honda. No, they've been there all the time because you were focused on it. Now you're seeing it everywhere. And so that's why that can be what helps with a vision board. It's putting it in focus for you. So now you're finding opportunities, that these opportunities have been there all the time. You just weren't seeing them. So if used correctly, if you're committed to taking action, yeah, the vision board can be an effective tool. But if you just think you're going to sit around, light candles, and breathe hard, no. It's just going to be you see, like you said, it's going to be a picture of all the things that you don't have.
Yeah, which is powerful. And the number one thing that we're really focusing on for people here, this whole conversation so far and where it's going, is taking action. Taking it as soon as you can and ensuring that you follow it through all the way to the end goal. And then you will have what was on that wall in your vision board. That's the goal.
Yeah. And you mentioned the other piece was success happens on the other side of fear. And I believe that to be 100% true. And what I found, like for me now, you get the butterflies, you're about to do something. It could be you're about to do a presentation. Maybe it's even having a difficult conversation with somebody that it needs to happen. To me, those butterflies, that's a signal that whatever's about to happen is something that I have to do, and that my success hinges on me doing this. So for me, it doesn't cause, you have fight or flight. It doesn't cause me to run in the opposite direction. I've learned that that's a signal that this is something that's important, that this is something that, it's not that I'm anxious. I converted, like I'm excited, just that little twist, telling yourself, oh man, I'm really feeling anxious right now. It's no, I'm really excited because it's the same energy pretty much. And if you're excited, you're going to be less likely to try to procrastinate. And so you're excited to do this. This is a signal that when I get on the other side of these butterflies or what I'm afraid of, then I have the potential for success.
And as part of that, Eric, and I feel like I might have actually wrote a reply to a tweet earlier today on this very topic. When you have that fear, that stress, that anxiety, you're pushing your boundaries, working at your edges. So it's telling you, ooh, I got the tingles because I'm challenging myself. And when we're doing that, that's when we're growing. And ultimately, when we're growing, that's what results in us either, depending on what you're motivated by, having a greater impact or even having greater income, because now you're a more fully fleshed out professional. You've grown in certain capacities.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think it's a sign that you're outside of your comfort zone. And yeah, I think that's key. It's like, and I tell people, like, if you join a gym and you're paying for like a personal trainer, and after every workout, you're like, oh yeah, I feel pretty good. You have the wrong instructor. You need to be cursing this person under your breath. You like I've been in some things. I'm literally like, I can't believe that I'm paying for this torture. Like my goal is just to get through this class alive. But what's happening is you're growing, and you're being broke. Your muscles are kind of breaking down in ways, And then ultimately, as you rest and recover, that's where the growth takes place. But you have to get through that.
And that's what we're effectively, like, the light bulb went off as you said it that way. What we're effectively saying is that stress, that anxiety, that pressure that you're feeling, that fear, if you will, we're breaking down our mind. We're breaking down mental barriers, and then we're rebuilding, or we're growing our mental muscles, and we're a better person, professional, what have you, because we've overcome that fear and we've stretched our workout, our mind muscle.
Absolutely. No, that's 100% correct.
So what are the different types of fear that block us, and how do you describe them to the readers or to our listeners in this case?
So you have the usual suspects. You have the fear of success, you have the fear of failure, and you have the fear of the unknown. So the fear of success is pretty common, actually. And it's where you're afraid of what the next level is going to present itself. And are you really up to it? Sometimes it plays out as what's called imposter syndrome. Where it's almost like am I really up to it? Like, so I have a friend of mine, she has her PhD, and she told me that when she goes into social settings, she never mentions that her name is Dr. So-and-so, because she's afraid that someone's going to try to ask her, "Oh, you're a doctor. Okay, well," start asking her some type of technical question she doesn't have the answer for. And maybe she's not as smart as she thinks, and da-da-da-da. I mean, I think that's an example. But and sometimes fear of success is that, okay, if I make it, if I get discovered, and, my podcast now has 1 million followers, and I guess I'm making this money, is that going to take me away from my family? Am I going to become a selfish person? And so that's some of it is as well. But most commonly, it's around that the imposter syndrome idea. Am I really up to what the next level will bring? So for that, I advise people a formula: be, do, have. Right? If I can become more, then I can do more. Then if I can do more, I can ultimately have more. So if you focus on becoming, you're always becoming more, and you're always looking to get better. You're always looking for that 1%, a hundredth of a second, and all of that, like we talked about earlier. There's no reason to fear what success is going to bring. So you have that. You have the fear of failure, which is pretty popular, where it's, that we live in like the worst case scenario. What if the presentation bombs? What if I fail the test? A lot of students, well, what if my grade point average drops? So the solution there is you have to focus more on the process than you do the outcome, right? So what's the process that leads to success? It's not just about, so if we take the example of a student, how many hours a day do I need to study, right? How often do I need to meet with my study group? How often do I need to meet with my tutor? So again, you almost make it like a math equation, like we talked about earlier. If I'm doing these things, I don't have anything to fear. I can live with the result.
Yeah, we go back to the law of numbers and say, as long as I'm putting X amount of time in,
exactly,
odds are, based on my history, I'm going to get through that exam, or I'm going to get through that presentation.
And so for me, if I look at a presentation that didn't go, I look back and I'm like, that didn't go well. There's usually something in the preparation phase that I could have done better, or I could have done differently, or I could have taken more time on something. So I think that's key. So I think you have to focus on the process. And then I think where it talks about the fear of the unknown, I think just the understanding that legacy and risk go hand in hand, right? If you want to leave a legacy, if you want to be remembered, there's some level of risk that you have to take.
Legacy and risk go hand in hand. Wow, that is powerful.
There's a lot of people that, are household names or famous, but they put a lot on the line. They took a lot of risks to the point where they weren't even very popular during their time. They're popular now, and we quote them, but during their time they weren't really popular because they were just going against the grain. They were taking risks. They stepped outside their comfort zone. But I think, even if you look at people that have built big businesses, they took a lot of risk. There wasn't, it was never a guarantee. There was never a 100% guarantee that their venture was going to succeed.
Yeah, I think the Elon Musk is a perfect example of that, right, Eric? I think if I'm not mistaken, there was a time there with Tesla that he was gambling it all, including his personal finances to make it through certain pay periods and get the company to where it was. And now everyone looks at him and focuses on the fact that he's, depending on what day of the week it is, either the richest or second richest person in the world. But there was a period of time where he was having big struggles with Tesla and SpaceX and Solar City, I believe, is the third one. So it's, they're a lot of these people, they risk everything. And when you think about failure, one of the ways you talk about getting around it is preparation as a way to mitigate it. So how does the preparation help us mitigate the failure?
Well, I think the more you prepare, the less you have to fear, right? If you did everything, go back to the Olympics. You did everything you possibly could do to be prepared, and if it doesn't work out, okay, but you left it out there on the track. You left it out there on the field. But also the other thing too, I think you talk about failure. You have to factor failure into your success plan, right? Because where people get tripped up, and this is why New Year's resolutions fail, within 90 days, is because you say, okay, this year I'm not going to eat cake. That's right. I'm going to give up cake. And then you have a moment of weakness, you eat cake, and you say, oh, what's the use? It's just me. I'm the cake eater. And you give up. But you have to, so if you set that goal, you have to understand that there's going to be a moment where you may eat some cake. But you have to know on the front end and be willing to, okay, I'm going to keep moving. So you have to have the right relationship with failure. And, you have to factor that into your success plan.
Yeah, on one of the recent episodes, the way my guest framed it, and this one is stuck with me and will continue to, is failure is just feedback, right? We take that feedback and we either grow and keep moving forward, or we let it derail us. In your example, I become Clint the cake guy, and well, I'm going to eat cake every time, so I might as well not even bother setting a goal because I'm going to fail, right? And instead of saying, hey, I dropped one, I'll get back up and I won't drop the next, which is definitely the way we should approach it. So what you're saying there, when we say preparation, that goes back to what you were just talking about when you were saying focus on the process, because the process is what allows us to be prepared. And so then if we fail, we know, hey, I did everything that I could and I happen to fail, but I'll take that as feedback for next time.
Right. Absolutely.
The one I love that I tend to speak to a lot of people about is perfection is the enemy of progress. Can you take our listeners through why perfection is at times a bad idea when we're trying to get things done, Eric?
So, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, so I talk to people that they say, yeah, I'm going to be an author. I'm going to write a book. And I'm like, oh man, that's great news. That's exciting. Where are you at with the book now? Oh, okay. Right now I'm doing research. And then several months later, I see, hey man, how's the book coming? Hey, I'm still doing research. And then, they're doing research for years. So what happens is a lot of times we feel like we have to have it all figured out before we can move forward. And you don't have that. You're never going to have it all figured out. So a lot of times, I tell this to people, you can't allow perfect to become the enemy of progress. You have to focus on the next step, right? What's the next step I can take? And it doesn't have to be a big step, right? It could be calling someone. It could be, I'm a big fan of having mentors. It could be calling your mentor who's already done the thing you're attempting to do. If you want to be a best-selling author, call someone who's already doing that. And they can give you a lot of tips to help you along that way. But yeah, so the key is to really just focus on the next step. You don't have to see the whole picture.
You just have to see the next step. And you have to know that next step is taking you have your vision of where you're going. That next step is the next step to take me on that vision. It doesn't have to be the end goal, but it's going to get me there.
So I was listening to this interview by Anne Lamott. she's the author of a great book. I think if you're an author, you need to read her book Bird by Bird, because it's like, yeah, it's called Bird by Bird. Her name is Anne Lamott. And in this interview, she was saying how she was talking about the same thing with authors, that, this whole perfectionism thing. She says, it's just like, you're driving down a dark road. You got your headlights on, and the only thing you can see is like directly in front of the car. You can't really see ahead of you. It's so dark. All you can see is directly in front of the car. But you can make it you can go your entire journey just by seeing what's in front of you. That's how it is with not focusing on perfection, but focusing on progress. You can focus on what's in front of you and ultimately get to your destination.
Yeah, just write 250 words a day for X amount of time, and you can edit them later. But if you never put a pen to paper or you never touch the keyboard, you're never going to write a book.
Right. And a lot of times as you go through that process, you start, the other things start coming to you. And like I've done things where I had this one idea for a title, and then all of a sudden as I'm going, the title starts changing. As I start getting, but I would never get there if I didn't start.
So one of the important things that ties to this is we have the vision, and the vision is this big, lofty goal, let's say, in the future. And one of the ways that we achieve that is we break it down into manageable chunks, so we can just take that first step and make it as small as possible so that we just get going. Can you talk about that process of taking big, lofty goals and breaking them down, Eric, and what we do there and how that can help us get moving on that first step and subsequent steps?
So typically, like I'm working with somebody, I work with them to set like start with 5 years. So it's, and I'll put them there at that time. So I'll say it's August of 2026, and you're talking to your business partner and you're saying, yeah, we did it. All right. This has been the best 5 years of business ever. Well, the question is, okay, what did you do? Right? What are those specific things that you accomplished? And so now you know what you want for 5 years, right? And then, so let's set 12-week goals, right? So now, because it's easy to lose momentum if you're thinking, okay, I'm going to accomplish this in 5 years. It's hard to maintain that same momentum for the entirety of 5 years. But if you break it down to 12-week windows, you have the momentum of the start, and then during week 11, you've got the pressure of the deadline, right? So you have that. So we break down the 5-year goal into what are we going to accomplish in the next 12 weeks that are going to get us to the 5-year goal. All right. So then from there, break it down daily. Okay. So I know what I want to accomplish in the next 12 weeks. What do I need to be doing every day that's going to move me in that direction? So I have a 3x5 card. I always had this 3x5 card with me. And so I have the Twiggs top 5. Right? That's what I call it. And so at the end of my day, I write down the 5 priorities I have for the following day. And again, it lines up with my 12-week goals and ultimately the vision. So ideally, everything I'm doing is moving me in that direction. And I tell you, if someone starts doing this can be a game changer, and they'll find that they're procrastinating a lot less. And the advantage, when you do it the night before, you find that you sleep better. And because you don't have all these ideas just floating around in your mind, and your subconscious goes to work, and you'll come up with other ideas to help execute what you're trying to execute. But that's how I break it down. That's how you take it from having a vision to what do I need to do every day.
And Eric, how long have you been using that method, including the Twiggs top 5 on the 3x5 card?
Oh, I've been doing this for several years now. So it's at least consistently I've been doing this whole thing, like I broke it down to you, for the last 5 years.
And how much of a difference have you seen on the achievement of 1 year goals, 2 year goals, 5 year vision?
Oh, it's made a huge difference. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it makes a big difference. What happens is you'll find that these things start nagging you, right? So you get to a point where you're not even you don't have the paper in front of you, but it's like, I really need to make that phone call. I need to call Joe, to set up that meeting. And then you look later, and that was on your sheet of paper. But it's like, again, it's like it's on a subconscious level when you do this consistently. And then it's almost like you don't want to end your day before you get everything checked off, because you get the whole dopamine rush when you check something off that you've done it.
Absolutely. Ticking off the box. Yeah. The tied to that, one of the things I often say to people in you went all the way there, is the more we can take these things that we need to do all the way down to not only daily, but turn them into habits, the easier our life becomes, right? So if I need to read 20 pages of a book a day, and if I do that at the end of the year, I hit my whatever, 40 or 50 books, whatever the goal is, but I can break it all the way down to just read 20 pages a day or go for a 45-minute walk a day. The more you can make it that habit, the easier it is to stack it and get that compounding effect over the time frame, whatever the time frame you're going for there is. That's a beautiful share. I love that for our listeners. How do you then, so let's say you have these goals and you've broken it down to here's what I'm going to do over the next 12 weeks. How do you use accountability to help you achieve it?
Well, there's a lot of ways you can do that. So you can have an accountability partner. I had nicest young lady you'll ever want to meet in your life. Her name was Laura. And she was my accountability partner for years, right? As a matter of fact, she was a big help to me getting the book done. So we'd have these conversations, maybe 15, 20 minutes. And we'd each say what we were going to do by the next call. Our calls were every Sunday at like 8:00. And then, so I remember I had one call with her. And so she says, "So Eric, did you get the outline done like we talked about?" No, I didn't. No, I felt terrible. And I remember I said to myself, I never want to feel that again. And so when you better believe that of course I had all these excuses, right? I had all these things going on. I just didn't prioritize my time effectively to be able to do it, if I'm just being honest with myself. But no, I'll say that's a good way, having an accountability partner, hire a coach. I think that's critical. That's it. Someone that is really going to hold you accountable to doing what you say you're going to do. Benefit of paying for it is that you're more likely to do it when you've got skin in the game. When you're paying for something, you're more likely to take it seriously and follow through and do those things than if you don't really feel like you have any skin in the game. So those are some ways to really kind of get that outside accountability.
The other thing that sometimes gets in our way, right? Talked about this with my sister actually as we were driving to Staples to pick up the chart paper for that outlining session today, Eric, is she mentioned that as a person who likes to always be moving forward, taking action, growing, 1% a day, like you and I were talking about earlier, that we may sometimes have a habit of taking on too many things and doing too much. And so then you run the risk of burnout, which leads to procrastination because your battery's just drained. And so you talk about the importance of saying no to allow you to achieve. So can you take our listeners through why saying no is so important? And I think you talk about the concept of a no list. Can you take us through that?
So here's the thing, success breeds opportunity, right? So as you start to become more successful, you become more visible. And when you become more visible, people are going to start asking you to do more. And if you struggle to say no, you'll find yourself tied up with a lot of things that you aren't passionate about. And you'll be spread so thin that you can't really focus on the main things. Because I just think I'm just finding that to be more important now. I just think you just really have to be intentional. So the high level people that I've been around, like, no is like their default until they get more information. They don't just, like, a lot of people, oh yeah, sure, oh yeah, be happy to help, no problem, yes. Now, the high achievers, no is their default until they can really get more information, because it's critical, because I mean the things that you commit to and say yes can really take you off track if you're not careful. So no, I think that's chapter 6 in the book. And I would encourage everybody to make sure you read that, because as you, I'm telling you, as you start to become more successful, achieve more things, and apply these principles, you're going to get asked to do things, and you don't have to say yes. And the thing is, you have to understand you're saying no to the opportunity and not to the person.
And this is one of those ones that's an interesting paradox that I want to explore with you together, Eric, because, and you may think differently. So we could have fun on this one. Is early in your career, what I often say to people when they're not yet successful and they're trying to climb that ladder is similar to Richard Branson. Start with yes, and then figure it out, because you're going to get things thrown at you. People are going to ask you, hey, can you do this? And you may not know how, right? It may be one of those sink or swim situations. And when you're young and you haven't taken those steps to move up the ladder, often the way you get there is by saying yes and really just taking it on and learning and growing and grinding. Is the power of no more when we've already achieved a certain level of success, and at that point saying yes to too much becomes problematic? Or do you get where I'm going with that one? Does that make sense?
Okay. So I think even if you're starting out, you still need to be able to say no. So for example, if you're the things you say yes to should be moving you in the direction of your goal. So when you're starting out, let's say your goal is to be a famous speaker. You're a successful speaker. If the Chamber of Commerce says, hey, you know what? Yeah, we want you to come speak. So if you're just starting out, and we don't have any money to pay you, but we want you to come speak. Yeah, you probably should say yes. You're trying to get out there, you're trying to make contacts, but that's in line with what you want to do, right? So if you're that same person, and let's say the PTA Association calls you and says, we want you to be the president of the PTA Association, but your dream is to be this speaker. That's what your vision. You may need to say no to even though it's not a bad thing to be the president of PTA. It's necessary, but maybe not necessary for you in this season. So you still need to be able to say no so you can stay focused. Now, let's say, same scenario, you are a more established speaker, and you're getting paid engagements all the time. And the Chamber of Commerce comes to you and says, hey, we want you to do this presentation. We don't have a budget, but we just want you to come do it. That may be something now you say, well, I'm sorry, but I really need to prioritize because I'm trying to take it to this next level. I've got this. So I think the things you say no, you still need to be able to say no. And you just have to understand that as you progress, there are going to be more demands on your time. There are going to be more requests made of you. Especially, again, the more visible you become. So I still think I don't know no matter where you are, I think the things you say yes to, because if you say yes to everything, you won't progress. You'll be president of PTA, you'll be speaking, you'll be president of this, that.
So develop your no muscle early. And as you climb, you're going to have to say it more and more. because you really want to focus the yes on those things that drive you forward in areas that you've laid out yourself in your vision, in your mission, right? So you've said, here's my 5-year vision for where I want to be. If it's not contributing to that, it's probably a no.
Is leading the Cub Scout troop going to move me in the direction of being a best-selling author? If I'm saying that's what I want. Again, nothing wrong with leading the Cub Scout troop, but in that season, is that the best investment of your time? And you have to remember, you have to multiply by 10. Because when people ask you to do things, however much time you think it's going to take you, multiply by 10. There's always more. It always ends up taking a lot more time. The requests people make. Oh, no worries. You'll have help. When you say yes and you start operating, usually it takes a whole lot longer. Or it takes about much more of your time to accomplish than you thought in the beginning.
Yeah, even something that, seems simple, like being a coach of your kid's sports team. It takes significantly more time than most parents who drop their kids off at the rink actually realize, or at the basketball court, or at the football, like whatever sport it is. You think, the coach probably puts an hour or two in a week. So it's phenomenally more than that. So I absolutely understand the importance and have to work on my no muscle, Eric. It's a little too weak for me right now. The other concept that I love that you dive into is mindset, and how mindset can help us overcome procrastination. Two of the things that you focus in on in your writing are gratitude and our attitude. Can you dive into that for us, Eric?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the foundation of your success, your mindset and your attitude. And I think so most people, like if you listen to like your self-talk, your mental chatter, 80% of it is negative. Try. Just listen. Maybe you're sitting at the light. Oh my gosh, I can't believe he cut me off. I can't. This guy to talk to this guy is crazy. So a lot of our mental chatter is negative, right? So we just have this habit of negativity. And think about, if you're in business, you're in leadership, you're there to solve problems, right? So you're always focused on the problem, and so you have to be careful though, because you can easily become a pessimist. And so the trick is to really focus on what you have to be grateful for. Just think about, and I tell you, in these times, if you have your health and you have your family and they're healthy, that's a whole lot just right there. And just really soak in those good feelings. So that's really critical. So if it's a bad habit that we have of the negative mental chatter. So whenever you have a bad habit, you have to replace it with a better one. And I'm just starting to see more just here recently that like literally the quality of your thoughts have everything to do with the questions you ask yourself.
Tell me more on this. Tell me more.
So for example, let's go to gratitude. If you wake up and just throw it out there. What do I have to be grateful for today? What am I thankful for today? And I guarantee you things will start coming to you. Like, you know what? I have a roof over my head. I know where my next meal's coming from. I have a loving family. So you start to come up with all of these things to really foster your sense of gratitude. And I think that feeling of well-being will really help you to overcome procrastination, as opposed to if you're just in this mindset of, what's the point? Oh, goodness. Yeah, here we go. It's not going to work anyway. You'll be more likely to procrastinate if that's your mindset. I tell you what, and it's one of those things. It sounds like a cliche, but it actually works. There's some things in business that people like me say, that sound like a cliche, like, focus on your passion, focus on being grateful and foster gratitude. And it's easy to dismiss it as a cliche, but I'm telling you, that is a success principle that doesn't fail.
Well, I think a lot of these things sound like a cliche because they work, right? So if you're on the outside, you're like, I hear everybody say that. Most of the people that are saying it to you are pretty successful. Maybe they're saying it for a reason, right? It's contributed to that. And you You were talking about mindset there, and something we've talked about on a lot of the episodes, Eric, is, I wouldn't be surprised if the little guy that's paying rent up in our head is negative even more than 80% of the time. It's rare, unless you're controlling your thoughts yourself, that when it's randomly just speaking, that it's positive. I almost never notice that unless I'm saying, hey, I'm going to do the thinking and control that. And that ties to one of the ways I learned to do that was through cognitive behavioral therapy, or stoicism, if you will, through a book on CBT and stoicism. And that ties to something that you say that's very powerful, which is it's not the event that matters, it's how we perceive it through our own thought process. So it's another spot where our brain or our mind or our thoughts can have an impact on us. Can you share with the readers what you mean by the difference between the event and how we perceive it?
Yeah, so two people can have the same event and experience the same event and have a completely different reaction. So, like, for example, the other day I had somebody on the podcast, Dr. Irvin Nugent, and I had him on the podcast, and he was talking about his dad when they were younger, and they had this fire, and the house burnt to the ground. And he said his dad said, I will build again. He looked at the wreckage. The family's freaking out. They're panicking. Oh my God, what are we going to do? And he's like, I'll build again. And now a lot of people in that same situation would be like, oh my gosh, we're in trouble. We've lost everything. The world is coming to an end. But again, so it's not necessarily the stimulus or the event. It's how you respond. And I think you just have to, and that's where mindset comes in. And if you're always working off of a positive mindset, like I said earlier, if you understand that everything is happening for you and not just to you, so you can have an event like that, and that, you know what, somehow, I don't understand now, but somehow this is happening for me. Now, I know people who, get a cancer diagnosis, and they're like, oh, I'm going to beat this. Yep, I'm going to beat this, and I'm going to help other people. A friend of mine that I went to college with was in that situation. That was his response. And guess what? He beat it. And now he's talking to other people about how they can beat it. But then again, we know of other people who got the same cancer diagnosis, and a lot of the reason they didn't beat it was because of the way they were thinking. So no, that is critical, and it starts with your mindset.
And so what are some ways that people can adopt or work on flipping that mindset to be more positive? So we talked about gratitude. Are there other ways that you recommend, Eric, people take to switch into that positivity mode?
So I think the other thing is not necessarily, there's a difference between having like a fixed mindset and having a growth mindset. And again, another great book on that topic, Carol Dweck, it's called Mindset. She gets into the details of the weeds of that. I talk about it in the book briefly too, but, really focus on having a growth mindset that, where you can always improve. And a lot of people, they say, oh, I'm not good at this, or I can't do that, or I've never been good at this. So a lot of times you're saying these negative things, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if that's a fixed mindset, that you're just not good. And maybe you had a mother or father that just said negative things to you like that all the time when you were younger. But I think it's important to have that growth mindset that I can always get better. I don't care what it is. You can always improve. You can always get better. And I think if you embrace that mentality that I can always improve, then that's going to help.
This entire podcast is based on the concept that we can grow, we can get better. Otherwise, what would be the point of learning, right? So you talked about it earlier, just getting 1% better every day if you can. And a lot of people think, oh, I graduated high school. I guess my learning's done. More people think, well, I graduated college. I guess my learning's done. Your learning is only done when you choose to finish it. There's an opportunity to learn every single day of your life. And I think the key that Eric's highlighting there is you have to actually believe that you can learn, that you can grow, that you can get better. The moment you don't believe those things, you're not going to learn. You're not going to grow. You're not going to get better. So having a mindset that says I can, and then taking it a step further and figuring out how I will grow is an absolute, Eric, my favorite thing in the world. Thanks for bringing up fixed versus growth mindset. And the other thing, so we just talked about you have to know that you can, which is a bit of self-awareness. So how can awareness of our own personality, our traits, our behaviors help us overcome procrastination and move forward in life?
So there's different personality types, right? And this is where awareness, you can take like assessments and things like that. But like, for example, if you are a highly analytical personality, there are people, I call them analytical Al, and you suffer from paralysis by analysis, right? You want to have 10 different choices for everything. So you have to have an awareness that sometimes you have to make a decision. It helps to kind of know that about yourself, and just really, we talked about earlier, just focus on the next step, and don't get stuck in that whole idea of, oh, I've got to have all the facts. So if you're that type of personality, you're the one that's really, you can tend to be a perfectionist because you want to have all the research done. And that's where having a coach or a mentor, because sometimes it's not just as simple as you solving it on your own. So if you know that about yourself, and there's some personality types where there's another one where you're very sociable, where you're very likable, but you don't want to take risks, and you tend to be more externally motivated, right? You don't have that inner drive. So if you know that about yourself, again, if you're trying to, let's say, start a workout routine, and you have the self-awareness to know that, sometimes I lack the inner drive. So you join a group, and if you join the group and you're not there, the people in the group are going to be like, hey, where's Eric? Or put your money on the line, pay an instructor, because you're like, okay, look, I'm paying this money, so I at least show up. So you have to know that about yourself. And so, like, if you're like me, you have the inner drive, you're that type A personality, but you have that tendency to put off some of the little details that you don't really see being part of the big picture. Like, it could be scheduling, it could be little expense reports and like that. Maybe it's time to hire a virtual assistant, get somebody that can handle the little details for you. That way you can get focused on they still need to be done. And if you don't, there could be bad consequences long term. You can't just put them off. So those are just some examples of how, being self-aware can help you to overcome procrastination.
So the more self-aware we are, the more we can effectively plug holes, or I always like to refer to them, or plug leaks in our game. And Eric, how would our listeners go about improving their self-awareness if they don't know what type of person they are, or they don't understand their personality? How are they going to improve that?
Well, there's different assessment tests you can take. So like Myers-Briggs, Wonderlic, there's the DISC. So you can take those various assessment tests, and it'll spell out. And I'm telling you what, I've found those to be very accurate over time, especially as I was looking to hire people for, aspects of my organization. So yeah, I think that can help. Again, partner with a coach or mentor, and pay attention to the patterns, right? I talk to people all the time and say, Eric, I always procrastinate. I have yet to meet somebody that just procrastinates in every area of their life. Like, I know people who, they may procrastinate in a work setting, but with the kids, they're always ahead of schedule. They are 100% on point. So you have to pay attention. So if you start paying attention to the patterns that, hey, every time I have to give a presentation, I procrastinate, or every time, it's time to clean the garage, I procrastinate. When you start to have that level of awareness, asking yourself questions can help with that.
And there's certain activities, and then what you might do is try to explore, well, what is it about that causes me to procrastinate, right? There's probably a deeper story that you can dig into and figure out so that you can avoid it in the future?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And then, so there's something that's called task aversion, right? It could just be as simple as you just don't enjoy doing the task. It's just not, it's something that has to be done, but I just don't like it. And so you'll just put it off just because it could be something that simple, or it could be something where, whenever you're trying to pursue something that's kind of the next level, your brain is giving you, is trying to protect you. So it's telling you, you sure? I don't know. You may want to, what if this happens? What if that happens? So it could be that fear we talked about earlier. So it could be whenever you're pursuing something aspirational, that's when you procrastinate. So the key, and one of the goals of the book is to really help heighten your self-awareness.
And what I loved that you threw out there, Eric, and for the listeners, you might not have caught it. So we talked earlier about automating certain things, and part of that, you talked there about virtual assistant as well. It's not just automating, but also outsourcing. So what are those activities that I always procrastinate on or that I have trouble doing that still need to get done? And if I can, I'm either going to automate them or I'll outsource if I'm able to.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so it's like if you look at podcasting, most podcasts only last like up to 14 episodes. That's the study.
Yeah, I celebrated when I crossed it. I published episode 19 2 days ago, so it was it felt way more real now.
Right. But what happens is a lot of times the host gets caught up with all of those details. There's aspects of podcasting that maybe they just don't like doing. It could be editing. It could be scheduling the guests. It could be sending, doing the marketing, whatever. So yeah, I think you're more like we're on episode 128 on my podcast, the 30-minute hour. We would probably have 127 less episodes if I didn't have a virtual assistant.
Yeah, well, you really juiced me up on this personal assistant idea, Eric. So I might pick your brain for a minute or two when we finish, if that's all right for you, on how you use it. Because it's to your point. There's so many, and it's not just this, right? There's so many other things, whether you're writing books or you're doing X or you're doing Y, where that virtual assistant could really help with all the little things. And even for our listeners, we talked about this on the last episode with Catherine. In your marriage, there, for a lot of relationships, there's one partner tends to be mom or the wife who carries what's referred to as emotional labor, because they're always thinking about the million things that has to happen with the children. And a lot of dads just show up, right? And so one of the ways you could probably use that virtual assistant is to help take some of that load off your partner. And a lot of people don't realize it's probably very cost effective for a lot of those small things to have the virtual assistant do them versus yourself.
Yeah, and it frees you up to, we talked about the zone of genius. It frees you up to do those things that are in your zone of genius and not get bogged down by some of the weeds, and some of the day-to-day things.
Yeah, because then you're in your zone of genius and you're doing the big ticket items, which are in your zone of genius, that are going to move you and your mission forward and towards your vision, which is where you should be spending your time. You've sold me, Eric. You've sold me on this one. Eric, we've spent a fair amount of time on helping people overcome their procrastination. Is there anything else you want to throw at them that's going to help them on this journey to take action?
Yeah, again, mentors. It's so important. I mentioned that earlier. And so again, on my podcast, the 30-minute hour, my co-host and I, it's like we look at each other every time, we have these highly successful people and they always talk about how mentors have helped them to get to where they are. And Ted and I are like, oh, there's that word again. But yeah, I just think don't try to be a lone ranger, right? Don't put yourself out there on an island. There's always somebody who has accomplished what you aspire to accomplish, who can really help you and cut your learning curve down. So definitely, make sure that you're seeking out mentor relationships.
That's perfect. And Eric, how can our listeners find you? So podcast, website, book, I want to make sure we get all of this in the show notes so that people can find you.
Yes. So the book is The Discipline of Now, 12 Practical Principles to Overcome Procrastination. You can pick up a copy on thedisciplineofnow.com. That's the website, thedisciplineofnow.com. The podcast is the 30-minute hour. The 30-minute hour podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. Any of those places that you like to go listen to podcasts, there you will find us.
Excellent. Thank you, Eric, for joining me today on The Pursuit of Learning. It was a pleasure having a conversation with you on these topics, which are some of my favorite in the world. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on The Pursuit of Learning. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and head over to our website, thepursuitoflearning.com, where you will find our show notes, transcripts, and more. If you like what you see, sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, your host in learning, Clint Murphy.